Alrighty, back in the garage here for another video on the A3. So today I wanted to talk about DSG Tunes. This car here, 2016 A3 Quattro, 6-speed DSG transmission. This one has the APR TCU Tune on it as of now. And I really want to talk about, what that does and why you would want to have that upgrade on your car. So for me, as I've spoken before on other videos, I'm a huge fan of the dual clutch transmissions. Not just DSGs or the S-Tronic. I mean PDKs. Anything that's got that modern high performance configuration. More of the automated manual. We're not talking about planetary gear, torque converter automatics. Obviously, if you're a performance guy, if you're a car guy, you want those really quick, aggressive, snappy upshifts. Right from the get-go. So I think that's obviously desirable. So let me first talk about the stock tune for the transmission on this car first, and I'll talk about the noticeable differences and improvement with the APR DSG Tune. So stock tune is good. Stock tune is very good. Shifts very quick. Everything very firm, crisp, and responsive. No really complaints about it. I think specifically the reason why someone would want to install a TCU tune, specifically because once you're on ECU software, let's just say you're stage 2, you're making, close to 400 pound-feet of torque, you've got your intake, you've got your intercooler, you've got your downpipe, making some pretty respectable gains there. I think specifically looking at the longevity and the safety for the transmission is that with the tune, you're getting so much more clamping pressure that you're going to prevent clutch slippage. So I've pulled it up on APR's website. I've got my notes in front of me here just to kind of look at some of these key bullet points. But you're looking at features for the TCU tune is faster acceleration, you're getting quicker shifts, increased clamping pressure, optimized shift times for better response. Again, increased clutch clamping pressure. So they have increased that clamping pressure beyond factory torque levels to support higher output. Smoother daily driving. This is a big one because a lot of people that have never driven a dual clutch car before, they find sometimes that being the nature of a DSG, being more of a manual transmission mechanically, a lot of times you could feel a little bit awkward when you're going through shopping centers, pulling out of parking lots, things like that, because you don't really have like that continuous idle forward that you would get from a torque converter automatic. So a lot of times it can feel a little bit hesitant. You've got your transmission set up with that mechatronic unit. It's set up to process driver input. So it can pre-select the right gear. So a lot of times stop and go traffic, parking lots. Sometimes you can kind of feel like when you're taking your foot off the gas, or you're off at a light acceleration from say first, and then you might suddenly let off at like a stop sign, and then go to put your foot back on. Sometimes, again, on the stock tune, you can feel like a little bit of maybe kind of jerkiness or hesitation, or your transmission's kind of like, wait, I'm not sure what you're trying to do. But specifically with the APR tune, that was one of the big things I noticed was you have a lot more smoother operation from daily driving. I think the transmission feels less confused. So to me, that's definitely a worthy, substantial upgrade for these cars. You do get 3-step launch control. So if you're into that, you can do a little bit more as far as like your launching. Some guys are into more of like a manual mode. So if you don't want your car to shift automatically once you hammer the gas going towards red line, like a manual car would, you can disable that if you want at the time of install. You also get to see the gear display. So stock, you would not have that feature. With the DSG Tune, your constantly will say D, and obviously 1 through 6 depending on what gear you're in. So you always will see that on your gauge in front of you. So that's to me, that's a cool upgrade. Another thing I'm going to talk about is D versus S. So typically on like a lot of these DSG cars, if you pull that shifter back, that will put you in S mode for sport. So basically, factory, I don't think it's the best design, because essentially what it will do is it will try to hold every single gear to red line. So you don't really have any like defined shift points. I think sometimes it's kind of an awkward mode. Again, unless you're merging on the highway, trying to hit wide open throttle and just hold that thing as long as it will go. But just from a normal driving standpoint, S to me is just not very useful in its factory form, just because it just seems awkward. It's trying to hold the RPMs way too high in awkward situations, and that's just to me not something I would go out of my way to enable. So after the DSG Tune, when you put that in S, you've got a whole new set of shift points. So you get a much more aggressive throttle response. It will hold the RPM much higher, but again, you don't have that situation where you're just beating on red line in a casual driving situation. Like you could still put it in S, and you could drive it like a normal car, and you still have sensible shift points, just being a little bit higher RPM. So S mode is now usable, essentially, is what I'm trying to say when you go with the DSG Tune on one of these cars. So that's kind of like your main key points, your sort of breakdown on why someone would want to install that tune on one of these cars. I mean, I think stock, if you haven't added any power, that's not really going to make sense to just start with a TCU tune. For me, I kind of am the type of person that likes to do things, I guess maybe a little bit more on the cautious side. I was told from my tuner that, stage 1 is not required to do the TCU upgrade. That's something where you get into stage 2 torque figures. That's when you really have to have that aggressive clamping pressure to prevent slippage. But for me, I like to do, I like to do both at once. So I went ECU and TCU at the same time. So to me, that was a worthy upgrade. Absolutely, at stage 2, I would advise someone with one of these cars to do the TCU as advised, by your APR tuners. That way, you're not going to have clutch slippage issues. So I think that's a good place to be. So I would absolutely recommend that for anybody. Again, Mark 7 GTIs, Golf Rs, A3s, F3s, making those increased torque numbers. Keep yourself protected. You don't want to have clutch slippage. You want that better drivability, those faster shifts. So well worth the upgrade. I would definitely do that again if I was on another one of these platforms. So TCU upgrade, good stuff. Go ahead and wrap that video up for today, and I'll keep you guys posted with the latest updates. So